Chapter 10, with my wife doing dishes in the background, which is fine. And I feel a little bit guilty saying so, but we're in paradise. Probably as close to paradise as I can ever imagine getting here. But anyway, Acts chapter 7 or 10, verse 7, we get the finishing of the backstory for Cornelius. When the angel who spoke to him, Cornelius, had gone, Cornelius called two of his servants and a devout soldier who was one of his attendants, and he told them everything that had happened and sent them to Joppa. That's the journey. Verse 9. About noon the following day, as they were on their journey and approaching the city, I think they would have made pretty good. They were not just at a leisurely walking speed to be approaching Joppa from where they had left. Well, okay, they had gone with haste. About noon the following day, as they were on their journey and approaching the city, Peter went up on the roof to pray. This was at Simon the tanner's house by the sea in Joppa. He became hungry and wanted something to eat. Now, I did leave one quick thing out. And it's not like, oh, this will give you more insight. But it's just like if you get on Jeopardy, you may want to know it. Around noon, in that part of the world, it's heating up, okay? No such thing as daylight savings time. And this was actual noon. And Peter goes up on the roof to pray. Two reasons he went up on the roof. One is catch the sea breeze, right? Simon the tanner by the sea breezes. Boy, that's helpful. Especially when you're in a fairly warm, sometimes hot climate. Okay. But he didn't go up there just to cool off. He went up to pray. Now, this may be a truly biblical concept to think through. Okay, well, and there's my wife. You can see she's in her lovely sundress. We'll be probably... Anyway. Now I've lost my train of thought. Oh, he went up to pray. Peter had a habit that we've seen of devoted time for prayer. Now, I think he did what Paul said in 1 Thessalonians, pray without ceasing, pray continually, always be praying. I think he did. But I also observed that he had certain times of day that he would devote to prayer. Most Christians basically don't. Most Christians pray when... This is awful to say, when they or someone they know have a crisis. That's not a bad time to pray. That's a good time to pray. But I wonder if we could benefit. So God doesn't get any benefit from your prayers or mine, but we do. And maybe there would be significant benefit if we would remember to set aside intentional times for devoted prayer rather than the basic... I need, now I'm going to pray. Which is not, there's nothing wrong with that. I'm just saying, I don't know very many Christians that have this intentional approach for a devoted period of time for prayer, like Peter did. Well, he went up to pray on the roof. And then in verse 10, he became hungry and wanted something to eat. And while the meal was being prepared, he fell into a trance. Okay, quick thing. In that culture, and even today in a Jewish culture, if you're someone's guest and you want something, you just say, I'd like to have lunch. Okay. And the sense I get is that Simon the tanner, it wasn't just Simon and his wife. I think they had servants. And so the servant began preparing the meal. Peter was up there. I don't think on the way up the stairs he said, I think I'm going to want lunch too. Can you start that? I think in this time of prayer, he was getting hungry, and he said, can I have something to eat? So they were working on it, and while they worked on it, he fell into a trance. Okay. Verse 11. He saw heaven open, and something like a large sheet let down to earth by its four corners. Weird, waking dream. Heaven opens, and something like a sheet comes down, but it doesn't float down like this. It comes down because it's suspended on its four corners. It contained all kinds of four-footed animals as well as reptiles and birds. This doesn't mean much to us at all because we're Gentiles. Read on. Verse 13. Then a voice told him, "Get up, Peter, kill and eat." Okay, now that would have gotten a Jew's attention because there were only certain kinds of animals that they were permitted to eat. I guess it could kill any animal, but in terms of eating, there were animals that were strictly forbidden by Jewish law. I'm given to understand that even today, a fundamental Jew will still observe not eating those kinds of animals and meat. I'm even given to understand that Seventh-day Adventists don't, they observe those dietary laws, and that's fine. You can if you want, but the instruction here, it wasn't like, hey, if you feel like it, you could kill this and then eat it. No. Get up, Peter, kill and eat. And then Peter goes in verse 14, "Surely not, Lord," Peter replied. "I have never eaten anything impure or unclean." So from that, it's easy to draw the conclusion that there were animals whose meat was forbidden by the law on this sheet. And oh, by the way, all kinds of animals, including reptiles, let down on the sheet. That's got to be a pretty good sized sheet, in my opinion. All right. Peter says, no, I've never eaten anything impure or unclean, and that indicates there were lots of unclean and impure animals on that sheet. Verse 15, the voice spoke to him a second time. "Do not call anything impure that God has made clean." A big statement. And for a Jew, huge in terms of its implications. And here's why. Because God had called certain things unclean, and the law forbade a Jew from eating the meat from those kinds of unclean animals. There's a very long list of unclean animals. The animals that are clean is a shorter list, but it wasn't like they were being deprived. No, they couldn't have bacon, couldn't have ham, a couple of my favorites. They also couldn't have shellfish. The list is pretty long. Anyway, Peter said, I can't eat that. What's that about? No, I've never had anything unclean or impure. And that's a pretty strong statement. Never? He could make that statement because their culture was built around those things were not even available. You'd have to go outside their culture to get you see what I'm saying? Okay. Don't call anything impure that God has made clean. Made clean. Okay, we're going to come back to that idea. This, verse 16, this happened 3 times. And immediately the sheep was taken back to heaven. So what happened? I think that whole experience happened 3 times. There's an interesting thing about the number of 3. How many days was Noah in the whale, according to Scripture? 3 days. How many days was Jesus in the tomb, according to Scripture? 3 days. This happened 3 times. I don't know that there's any connection, but to me it's one of those, well, that's an interesting thing. This happened 3 times, and immediately the sheep was taken back to heaven. It's not like, Peter hadn't taken any of those animals off the sheet and slaughtered them and sent them down to be prepared for a meal. But the experience of that sheet descending, this conversation, a word from God, kill and eat. And Peter's saying, no, I don't eat impure things. And then God's pronouncement, don't call anything impure that God has made clean. Well, okay, here's why that matters. It's not completely about food. Verse 17. While Peter was wondering about the meaning of the vision, the men sent by Cornelius found out where Simon's house was and stopped at the gate. They called out, asking if Simon, who was known as Peter, was staying there. That's not a coincidence. Nothing about that is coincidental. I think I'd say it stands to reason. It maybe doesn't seem that way to you, but to me it stands to reason that because God had given the vision to Cornelius, Cornelius had sent his servants and a soldier to find Peter, and they were soon, apparently there was not much time that passed between the vision and their being at the gate inquiring about Simon Peter. So Peter's up there thinking about this vision. Now the dots connect. Verse 19, while Peter was still thinking about the vision, the Spirit said to him, I've never had that happen to me. I don't think that's necessarily true. I've just never audibly heard his voice. But every time I open Scripture, if my heart is ready, receptive, and my mind is tuned, I can hear the Spirit. But not in the same way that Peter heard it. I think Peter heard an audible voice in his head. I don't think anybody else heard it. But anyway, the Spirit said to him, Simon, 3 men are looking for you. So get up and go downstairs. Do not hesitate to go with them, for I have sent them. Now we can look at this and go, dots connected. I'm not sure at this moment Peter connected those dots. Verse 21, Peter went down and said to the men, I'm the one you're looking for. Why have you come? The men replied, we have come from Cornelius the centurion. He's a righteous and God-fearing man who is respected by all the Jewish people. A holy angel told him to ask you to come to his house so that he could hear what you have to say. Then Peter invited the men into the house to be his guests. Boy, all right, just a quick poke at this before I close for today. Essentially, this was God saying, Peter, with what you know now, start connecting the dots, dude. Okay? These servants and the soldier, I don't know who the spokesperson was, but they communicated to Peter, Cornelius is a righteous, godly man, respected by the Jews. And the inference of that is he deserves to hear from you. And oh, by the way, he gave him a message and he sent us Okay. Next time, we'll pick it up here on Soul Care with Stevie Boy.